Story number 1. The Devil's Melody. Christmas has always been a time of joy and warmth, a season where lights twinkle brighter and hearts feel lighter. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and what was meant to be a cherished holiday turned into a terrifying ordeal that still haunts me to this day. It was December 20th, 2023, when I received the antique music box as a gift from my best friend, Laura. We had been through so much together, and I wanted to give her something special for Christmas. Laura had a penchant for vintage items, especially those with a story to tell. So, when I found the music box at a local flea market, nestled among forgotten trinkets, I knew it was perfect. The music box was exquisite, carved from dark wood with intricate designs adorning its surface. The lid featured a delicate ballerina, poised gracefully in mid-dance. As I opened it, the lid clicked into place, and a soft, melodious tune began to play. The melody was enchanting, a classic Christmas carol that seemed to fill the room with warmth. Laura was thrilled, her eyes sparkling with delight. "It's perfect, Sarah. Thank you so much." That night, as I placed the music box on my mantel, I couldn't help but admire its beauty. The room was bathed in the soft glow of Christmas lights, the scent of pine and cinnamon filling the air. Everything seemed idyllic, the perfect setting for a holiday season filled with love and laughter. But as the days went by, subtle changes began to occur. It started with small things, items slightly out of place, the music box playing faintly even when it was closed. I dismissed these occurrences as mere coincidences or my imagination playing tricks on me. After all, the holiday season can be stressful, and it's easy to let your mind wander. However, the strange events escalated quickly. One evening, I was working late, finishing up some last-minute preparations for our Christmas party, when I heard the music box playing on its own. The melody was slow and distorted, the notes warped in a way that made my skin crawl. I walked over to the mantel, heart pounding, to find the lid open and the ballerina frozen in an unnatural pose, my breath visible in the suddenly cold air. I tried to close it, but my hands trembled so much I could barely grip the latch. As I struggled, the room seemed to darken, the festive lights flickering ominously. Shadows danced along the walls, stretching and contorting into grotesque shapes. The music became louder, more insistent, filling the room with an oppressive presence. I backed away, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. "Sarah," a voice whispered, barely audible over the distorted melody. I spun around, eyes wide with fear, but there was no one there. The room was empty, save for the sinister music box and the lingering shadows. Determined to regain control, I grabbed the box and fled to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. But the torment wasn't over. Every night, the music box played, each rendition more disturbing than the last. The melodies twisted into nightmarish versions of beloved Christmas tunes, echoing through my home like a ghostly lament. Sleep became elusive, my nights filled with the haunting music and the ever-present feeling of being watched. Desperate for answers, I began researching the history of the music box. What started as a simple gift turned into a journey into the unknown. I discovered that the box was not just an ordinary antique. It once belonged to a child named Emily, who had tragically died in a fire in her family home decades ago. The news clippings I found spoke of a young girl who loved Christmas, her laughter and joy extinguished by the flames that consumed her home. But the most chilling discovery was a personal account from Emily's older brother, Thomas. In his journal, he wrote about the music box, how Emily had cherished it, playing it every Christmas to bring hope and joy. On the night of the fire, he had left the music box on the mantel, hoping the melody would comfort her, not knowing it would seal her fate. As I delved deeper, the presence in my home grew stronger. Shadows moved on their own, and the temperature would drop inexplicably, making me shiver despite the layers of clothing I wore. Laura became increasingly concerned, noticing the toll the haunted music box was taking on me. One particularly cold night, The music box played a distorted version of Silent Night. The melody was slow, drawn out, and filled with sorrow. I felt a presence in the room, a sorrowful energy that seemed to emanate from the very walls. The shadows coalesced into the faint outline of a child, her eyes hollow and filled with pain. "Help me," she whispered, her voice a haunting echo that reverberated through the room. "Find peace." Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the music box was more than just a cursed object. It was a vessel for Emily's restless spirit, trapped by her untimely death and the lingering sorrow that bound her to the world of the living. Determined to set her free, I decided to perform a ritual of remembrance, hoping to honor her memory and grant her the peace she deserved. Armed with Thomas's journal and a deep sense of compassion, I gathered the necessary items: candles, a mirror, and the photographs of Emily and her family. I set up the altar in the living room, arranging the items with care. As I began to chant the words from the journal, the room grew colder, the air thick with anticipation. The music box was placed at the center, its lid open, allowing the melody to flow freely. I recited the prayer, my voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at me. "Emily, if you can hear me, please find the light that guides you home. Let the music that once brought you joy now lead you to peace." As I spoke, the shadows began to recede, the oppressive presence lifting as if acknowledging my plea. The music box played its final, pure rendition of Silent Night. The melody clear and serene, the apparition of Emily appeared before me, her expression softening into one of gratitude and peace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now a gentle breeze that carried away the last remnants of her sorrow. "I can finally rest." With those words, Emily's spirit faded, the room returning to its normal warmth and light. The music box ceased to play, its power spent in granting her wish. A profound sense of calm settled over me, and I knew that the haunting had finally ended. In the days that followed, the strange occurrences ceased, and my home returned to its peaceful state. Laura and I both felt the weight of the ordeal lift, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and gratitude. The music box was carefully placed in a display case, a testament to the supernatural journey we had endured and the peace we had helped a lost soul find. Years later, I still visit antique shops, cautious but hopeful that I won't encounter another cursed object. The memory of that Christmas remains vivid, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between our world and the supernatural. The story of Emily's restless spirit serves as a chilling testament to the power of remembrance and the enduring quest for peace. Sometimes, when the winter winds howl and the snow begins to fall, I can almost hear the faint echoes of Emily's melody, a haunting reminder that some stories are meant to be remembered, and some spirits are destined to find their peace through our compassion. Because in the heart of winter, amidst the silent nights and the lingering shadows, the echoes of the past continue to resonate, forever a part of the stories we cherish and the memories we hold dear. Story number 2. Whispers of Yuletide Shadows. Winter in the English countryside held a serene beauty, blanketing everything in pristine white and casting long, soft shadows under the pale moonlight. My name is Jonathan Harris, and what was supposed to be a joyful Christmas season turned into a haunting nightmare that forever changed my family's life. It was Christmas Eve, 2012, when my daughter, Lily, received an antique doll from her grandmother. The doll was exquisite, dressed in a vintage red and white Christmas outfit, complete with a frilly dress and a delicate bonnet. Her grandmother had found it at a local antique fair, insisting it was a perfect gift for Lily's first Christmas. Little did we know, this seemingly innocent gift would bring with it a darkness we couldn't have imagined. Lily was enchanted by her new doll. Every night, before bed, she would whisper to it, telling it stories about her day and sharing her dreams for the future. At first, it was adorable. Her innocent conversations filled our home with warmth and laughter. But soon, subtle changes began to unsettle us. It started with small things, Toys would be found in unusual places, books slightly rearranged on the shelves, and faint giggles echoing through the house when no one was around. My wife, Claire, and I dismissed these incidents as the playful imagination of a young child. However, the occurrences grew more frequent and more disturbing as days passed. One cold December night, around midnight, Lily was asleep in her bed, clutching the doll tightly. I was awakened by a strange noise, a soft, eerie laughter coming from her room. Groggy and disoriented, I stumbled out of bed, my heart pounding in my chest. As I approached Lily's room, the laughter grew louder, more sinister. I peeked through the slightly ajar door and saw Lily sitting upright in bed, her eyes wide and fixed on the doll. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "The doll is talking to me," I reassured her, trying to brush off the incident as a vivid dream. But the next morning, we discovered that several items had moved overnight. Her toys were scattered across the floor, and the doll was perched on her dresser, staring blankly at us with its glassy eyes. Concerned, Claire and I decided to investigate the doll's origins more thoroughly. We learned that the doll, known as Annabelle's Yuletide, had a troubled history. It had belonged to a young girl named Emily who had tragically lost her life in a house fire on Christmas Eve, 1935. The doll was said to be her favorite companion, and after her death, strange occurrences were reported wherever the doll was kept. Despite the unsettling history, we couldn't bear to take the doll away from Lily. It had become a cherished part of her Christmas tradition. However, the disturbances didn't stop, they intensified. Objects flew off shelves with no explanation. Chilling drafts swept through rooms, and the laughter that once seemed playful now carried an undertone of malice. One particularly frigid night, Claire and I decided to confront whatever was tormenting our home. Armed with a flashlight and a heavy heart, we entered Lily's room. The air was thick with tension, and the temperature had plummeted unnaturally. The doll sat on the bed, its eyes gleaming eerily in the dim light. "Lily," Claire called softly, trying to soothe her daughter. "Do you want us to take the doll away?" Lily shook her head vehemently, her eyes darting between us and the doll. "No, Mommy, she's my friend." Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness as the lights flickered and went out. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my phone, using its light to illuminate the room. In that moment, the doll began to move on its own, its limbs jerking unnaturally. It raised its tiny hand, pointing toward the window, and a bone-chilling scream echoed through the house. We fled the room, our hearts racing, and locked all doors and windows. But the disturbances continued relentlessly. Every night, the laughter returned, now accompanied by whispered threats and the sound of heavy footsteps roaming the halls. It became clear that the doll was more than just a toy. It was a conduit for Emily's restless spirit, unable to find peace after her untimely death. Desperate to end the torment, Claire and I sought the help of a local paranormal investigator, Mrs. Whitaker, known for her expertise in dealing with haunted objects. She arrived one snowy evening, her presence bringing a sense of hope amidst the chaos. After examining the doll and our home, she concluded that the spirit within Annabelle's Yuletide was deeply attached to our family, possibly seeking attention or a way to resolve unfinished business. Mrs. Whitaker guided us through a cleansing ritual, involving the use of blessed herbs, sacred prayers, and the burning of sage to purify our home. She instructed us to place the doll outside our house, hoping to release Emily's spirit from her earthly bonds. Reluctantly, we agreed, understanding that it might be the only way to restore peace to our lives. On Christmas Eve, we carried the doll to the nearby woods. Under the cover of a starless night, the cold air was biting, and the snow crunched under our feet as we found a secluded spot away from our home. Following Mrs. Whitaker's instructions, we buried the doll, covering it with earth and whispering words of farewell. As we stood there, a sudden gust of wind swept through the trees, and the temperature dropped sharply. The ground beneath us seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. and for a moment, the spirit of Emily appeared before us, a sorrowful figure cloaked in white, her eyes filled with both sadness and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice carrying a weight of years of longing. "I can finally rest." With those words, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, and a sense of peace settled over the woods. We made our way back home, the haunting laughter and whispers now replaced by the gentle sounds of nature. The following morning, our home felt lighter, the chilling presence gone, and the remnants of the doll's influence dissipated. Life slowly returned to normal, and Christmas regained its joyous essence. However, the memory of those terrifying nights remained etched in our minds, a constant reminder of the thin veil between our world and the supernatural. We never spoke of the doll again, choosing instead to focus on the love and warmth that truly defines the holiday season. Years later, I still think about that Christmas, the darkness that crept into our lives, and the desperate measures we took to reclaim our peace. The experience taught me the importance of understanding and respecting the past, and the power of love and unity in overcoming even the most harrowing of challenges. Sometimes, when the first snow begins to fall and the scent of pine fills the air, I can almost hear the faint echoes of Emily's laughter, a haunting reminder of the fragile balance between joy and sorrow. The spirit of Yuletide shadows lives on in my memory, forever a part of my Christmas story. Tale of love, loss, and the enduring quest for peace. Because in the heart of winter, amidst the silent snow and the lingering shadows, the echoes of the past continue to resonate, forever entwined with the stories we cherish and the memories we hold dear. Story number 3. Whispers of the Past. Winter in Toronto was a serene and quiet affair. The city transformed into a glittering wonderland by the soft blanket of snow and the myriad of festive lights. My name is Rebecca Thompson, and what was supposed to be a joyous Christmas season became a chilling ordeal that my family and I are still grappling with to this day. It was December 15th, 2005, when the first incident occurred. My grandmother, Evelyn Thompson, had passed away 5 years prior, leaving a void in our lives that no amount of holiday cheer could fill. Evelyn had been the heart of our family gatherings, her warm smile and infectious laughter making every Christmas memorable. So, when we received a beautifully crafted Christmas card addressed to us, signed with her familiar handwriting, we were both delighted and puzzled. Evelyn had no known address, as she had been living with us until her passing. The card arrived in our mailbox on a crisp December morning, the snowflakes dancing playfully around it as if heralding its arrival. The envelope was elegant, adorned with intricate designs and a deep red wax seal bearing the initial E. We exchanged curious glances, wondering how a card from Evelyn could have reached us after all these years. Inside, the card was a masterpiece of craftsmanship. The front featured a delicate illustration of a snow-covered cottage nestled among evergreen trees, with twinkling lights adorning each window. The message inside was heartfelt and warm, just as Evelyn had always written, "Wishing you a Merry Christmas filled with love and joy. May the spirit of the season bring you peace and happiness. Love, Grandma Evelyn." Tears welled up in my eyes as I read the familiar words. "How is this possible?" I whispered, my voice trembling. My husband, Michael, and my 2 children, Emily and Jake, joined me, sharing my confusion and awe. That night, as we gathered around the fireplace, the warmth of the room contrasted sharply with the cold outside. The family exchanged gifts and shared stories, trying to embrace the festive spirit. After the evening festivities, as we settled into our beds, the events of the day lingered in our minds. But little did we know, the true nightmare was just beginning. On Christmas Eve, around midnight, an eerie stillness settled over our home. The usual sounds of the night were absent, replaced by an unsettling silence. I was awakened by a faint melody, a slow, distorted version of Silent Night emanating from the living room. My heart raced as I sat up, The memory of Evelyn's voice, soothing yet now twisted into something sinister. I cautiously approached the living room, the music growing louder with each step. There, on the mantel where we had placed the Christmas card, sat an ornate music box. I didn't remember seeing it before. Its design was intricate, featuring the same snow-covered cottage from the card. But now it seemed to shimmer with an unnatural light. My hands shook as I reached out to touch it, the music box playing a hauntingly slow and distorted version of the carol. "Michael, wake up," I called softly, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael stirred beside me, his eyes still heavy with sleep. I motioned for him to join me in the living room. He looked at the music box, confusion etched on his face. "I didn't see it before," he said, equally puzzled. As we watched, the melody continued to play, and the snowflakes on the music box began to swirl and move, forming shapes that resembled shadows dancing in the night. Suddenly, the room grew colder, our breaths visible in the frigid air despite the heater working overtime. Emily and Jake, sensing our distress, joined us, their innocent eyes wide with fear. "Grandma Evelyn?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "Is that you?" The music box paused, the silence deafening. Then, the faint sound of laughter echoed through the room, a sound that was both familiar and terrifying. The shadowy forms continued to dance around the music box, their presence growing more pronounced, filling the room with an oppressive atmosphere. Michael grabbed my hand, his grip tight with concern. "We need to get out of here," he urged, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. But as we moved towards the front door, the music box began to play again, the melody returning with a vengeance. The shadows extended their hands, reaching out towards us, their touch icy and uninviting. The lights flickered, and the room seemed to warp, the festive decorations now twisted and distorted. I turned to face the music box, determination stealing my nerves. "Grandma, please, stop this. We love you." The shadows recoiled slightly, their forms wavering as if responding to my plea. The laughter softened, turning into sorrowful whispers that filled the room. "Remember us?" The voices echoed, a chorus of lost souls seeking recognition and peace. Desperate to end the torment, Michael and I decided to perform a ritual of remembrance, hoping to honor Evelyn's memory and release her spirit from our home. We gathered around the music box, holding hands and closing our eyes, reciting the words from Evelyn's journal that we had found after her passing. "May the love and joy of Christmas guide our spirits to peace. Remember us, cherish our memories, and let our souls find eternal rest." As we chanted, the shadows began to dissipate, the oppressive cold lifting as the room returned to its normal temperature. The music box played a final, pure version of Silent Night. The melody clear and serene, a gentle light enveloped the room, and the oppressive presence faded away, leaving behind a sense of peace and closure. The next morning, we awoke to a quiet house, the events of the previous night seemingly erased. The music box was no longer on the mantel, but instead, it sat on the coffee table, a single snowflake etched into its surface, a symbol of the love and remembrance that had set Evelyn's spirit free. In the days that followed, the strange occurrences ceased, and our home returned to its usual warmth and festivity. However, the memory of that Christmas night lingered, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between our world and the supernatural. We never spoke of the ordeal, choosing instead to focus on the love and unity that defined our family. Years have passed since that fateful Christmas, but the story of the haunted music box remains a poignant chapter in our family history. It serves as a reminder of the enduring power of love and the importance of remembering those who have passed on. The echoes of that night continue to resonate within me, a testament to the fragile balance between joy and sorrow, life and death. Sometimes, when the first snow begins to fall and the scent of pine fills the air, I can almost hear the faint strains of Silent Night, a haunting melody that speaks of love, loss, and the eternal quest for peace. the spirit of Evelyn Thompson lives on in our hearts, her memory forever intertwined with the magic and mystery of Christmas. Because in the heart of winter, amidst the silent snow and the lingering shadows, the whispers of the past continue to resonate, forever a part of the stories we cherish and the memories we hold dear. Story number 4. Shadows in the Threads. Winter in New York City was a symphony of contrasts. The relentless hustle of the streets, the towering skyscrapers piercing the gray sky, and the ever-present blanket of snow created a cityscape both beautiful and unforgiving. My name is Daniel Harper, and what was meant to be a joyous Christmas season transformed into a living nightmare that I can barely recount without shuddering. It was December 1998, a time when the festive spirit was at its peak, and the city was adorned with twinkling lights and elaborate decorations. My friend, Michael, had always been generous, and that year, he surprised me with an unusual gift, a meticulously knitted sweater. It was a fine piece, crafted from soft, warm wool in deep burgundy, with intricate patterns woven into the fabric. Michael insisted it was handmade by his grandmother, a master knitter with a reputation for creating garments that were both beautiful and imbued with a sense of comfort. I remember the day vividly. Michael handed me the box wrapped in festive paper, his eyes gleaming with genuine delight. "Merry Christmas, Dan. I thought you'd like this." I smiled, appreciating the gesture. "Thanks, Mike. It's beautiful." As I examined the sweater, I felt a strange sense of warmth emanating from the threads, an almost palpable energy that seemed to beckon me to wear it. That evening, as I settled into my favorite armchair with a cup of tea, I decided to try it on. The sweater fit perfectly, hugging my frame in all the right places. I admired the craftsmanship, running my fingers over the delicate patterns that adorned the sleeves and chest. Little did I know, this simple act of wearing the sweater would mark the beginning of a series of terrifying experiences that would haunt me for years to come. That night, I had my first nightmare. I found myself walking down a dark, narrow alleyway, the city's vibrant lights replaced by an oppressive darkness. The air was thick with an unidentifiable stench, and the only sound was the distant wail of sirens. As I turned a corner, shadows began to materialize around me, dark, amorphous forms that twisted and writhed with malevolent intent. I tried to run, but my legs felt heavy, as if wading through molasses. The shadows closed in, their presence suffocating, their whispers echoing in my ears. "You shouldn't have worn it," they hissed, their voices a cacophony of anger and sorrow. I jolted awake, heart pounding, drenched in sweat. The sweater lay on the floor beside me, its fabric now cold and lifeless, shaking off the remnants of the nightmare. I dismissed it as a mere bad dream, a product of stress and overexposure to holiday festivities. However, the nightmares did not cease. Each night, without fail, I was plunged into the same dark alleyway, pursued relentlessly by the shadows. Their whispers grew louder, their forms more defined, their presence more terrifying. Sleep became a battleground, and exhaustion gnawed at me during the day. Desperate for answers, I confided in Michael. He listened intently, his expression growing serious. "I'm sorry, Dan. I had no idea. My grandmother used to say that some gifts carry more than just warmth and comfort." "More than what?" I demanded, frustration and fear lacing my voice. She sighed, choosing her words carefully. She believed that certain materials could hold onto memories, emotions, sometimes even spirits. Maybe the sweater has something to do with that old house she lived in. Michael had grown up in a large, Victorian-era house with his grandmother, a sprawling estate that was rumored to be haunted. The stories were dismissed as mere folklore. But now, faced with my torment, they seemed eerily plausible. Determined to break free from the nightmare, I sought out a local spiritualist named Madame Esmeralda. She was renowned for her ability to communicate with the unseen and unravel the mysteries that plagued the living. After a brief consultation, she agreed to help me, We met in her cozy, dimly lit parlor, the air thick with the scent of incense and the soft glow of candlelight. Madame Esmeralda was an enigmatic figure, her eyes seemingly seeing beyond the physical realm. I explained my situation, detailing the nightmares and the unsettling whispers that accompanied them. She listened patiently, nodding thoughtfully. The sweater you wear is more than just a garment, Daniel. It's a vessel, a conduit for unresolved energies from a place of great sorrow and tragedy. Do you know anything about it? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. Michael said it was made from fabric taken from his grandmother's house. Madame Esmeralda closed her eyes, her hands hovering over a crystal ball. Images began to form within the orb, flashes of a grand old house engulfed in flames, the screams of a child, and shadows dancing amidst the chaos. This sweater was woven from the remnants of that house, from fabrics touched by tragedy and loss. The spirit of a young boy remains bound to it, unable to find peace. I felt a chill run down my spine. Is there any way to release him? She nodded slowly. There is a ritual, but it requires courage and a willingness to confront the darkness that binds him. We must cleanse the sweater and lay his spirit to rest. Determined to end the torment, I agreed to proceed. The ritual was to be performed on Christmas Eve, a symbolic gesture of both the season of joy and the need to confront lingering sorrow. Madame Esmeralda instructed me to bring the sweater and meet her at a designated location, an abandoned warehouse that once served as a community center. As Christmas Eve approached, anxiety gnawed at me. The nights were getting colder, and the nightmares more intense, each one a vivid reminder of the darkness I couldn't escape. Finally, the night arrived. I donned the sweater, its fabric now a familiar yet foreboding presence against my skin. Madame Esmeralda met me at the warehouse, her presence calming yet commanding. The building was desolate, the windows boarded up, and the air thick with the scent of decay. We set up an altar in the center, laying out candles, crystals, and symbols of protection. As we began the ritual, Madame Esmeralda chanted softly, her voice weaving through the cold air. I felt the sweater pulse with an energy of its own, the shadows around us beginning to shift and coalesce. The atmosphere grew heavy, the temperature dropping as if the building itself was absorbing our intentions. Suddenly, the air was pierced by a loud crash, the sound of breaking glass, and the shadows surged forward, their forms twisting into the shape of a young boy. His eyes were hollow, filled with pain and longing. "Why won't you let me go?" he cried, his voice echoing through the empty space. Madame Esmeralda held up her hands, a barrier of light forming around us. "We honor your memory. We acknowledge your pain. Find peace and be free." The boy's form flickered, his sorrowful gaze meeting mine. "I'm trapped," he whispered. "I can't move on." I stepped forward, my voice breaking the silence. "I'm sorry for what happened to you. We want to help you find peace." The boy's expression softened, the tension in his form beginning to dissipate. "Remember me," he said, his voice fading. "Remember my story, and let me rest." A brilliant light enveloped the room, the shadows dissolving into nothingness as the boy's spirit found the closure it had long sought. The temperature began to rise, the oppressive cold lifting as a sense of calm washed over me. The ritual complete, Madame Esmeralda turned to me with a gentle smile. "He is free now, but remember, some gifts carry memories that must be honored and respected." As we left the warehouse, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, I felt a profound sense of relief and gratitude. The nightmares ceased, and the whispers were replaced by the peaceful silence of a Christmas morning. In the weeks that followed, the sweater no longer brought fear but a bittersweet reminder of the ordeal we had endured. Michael and I grew closer, our bond strengthened by the shared experience. The story of the haunted sweater became a family legend, a tale of love, loss, and the enduring power of remembrance. Years later, as I reflect on that Christmas, I realize how fragile our connection to the past can be. and how the unresolved sorrow of those who have passed can linger in the most unexpected places. The sweater remains a cherished memento, a symbol of the courage it took to confront the darkness and the love that helped set a restless spirit free. Sometimes, when the winter winds howl and the snow begins to fall, I can almost hear the faint echoes of a child's laughter, a haunting melody that speaks of hope and the eternal quest for peace. The spirit of that Christmas night lives on in my heart, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always a path to redemption and healing, because in the heart of winter, amidst the silent snow and the lingering shadows, the whispers of the past continue to resonate, forever a part of the stories we cherish and the memories we hold dear. Story number 5. Shadows Behind the Glass. Winter in London was a season of stark contrasts. The city, with its historic architecture and bustling streets, transformed into a serene wonderland under a blanket of snow. The festive lights twinkled against the darkened sky, casting long shadows that danced with the gentle breeze. My name is Eleanor Blake, and what was meant to be a joyous Christmas turned into a nightmare that still haunts me to this day. It was December 15th, 2020, when my husband, Thomas, gifted me an antique mirror he had found at a local flea market. The mirror was exquisite, framed in ornate gold with intricate carvings depicting scenes of winter landscapes and festive celebrations. This glass was flawless, reflecting the room with a clarity that made it a perfect addition to our bedroom. Thomas insisted it was a perfect Christmas present, something timeless and elegant. On Christmas Eve, as we decorated our home with the usual holiday cheer, I placed the mirror on the wall opposite our bed. Its presence added a touch of old-world charm to our modern decor. That night, after the excitement of the day had settled and the house was quiet, I drifted off to sleep with the soft glow of Christmas lights illuminating the room. But sleep was not to come easily that night. At around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by a faint noise, a soft, almost imperceptible whispering. My heart pounded as I sat up, the room cloaked in darkness save for the twinkling lights reflecting off the mirror. I listened intently, my breath visible in the cold air. The whispering grew slightly louder, forming indistinct words that sent a chill down my spine. Eleanor. I froze, my eyes fixed on the mirror. At first, I saw nothing unusual. The room was as it should be, calm and still. But then, in the reflection, I noticed a shadowy figure moving behind me. My blood ran cold as I turned to look. But there was no one there. The room was empty. Thomas? The whisper echoed again, more insistent this time. I rubbed my eyes, convinced I was dreaming, shaking off the unease. I tried to go back to sleep, but the whispers persisted, growing louder and more urgent. The shadow in the mirror became clearer, a dark, indistinct shape that seemed to be moving closer to me with each passing moment. The next morning, I recounted the experience to Thomas, who listened with a concerned expression. He dismissed it as a vivid nightmare, attributing it to the stress and excitement of the holiday season. However, he promised to keep an eye on the mirror, just in case. Over the next few nights, the disturbances continued. Each night, the whispers grew louder, and the shadow in the mirror became more defined. It began to take on a more humanoid form, with elongated limbs and hollow eyes that seemed to stare directly into my soul. The presence was oppressive, filling the room with an unsettling energy that made it difficult to breathe. Determined to understand what was happening, Thomas and I decided to investigate the mirror's origins. We delved into the history of the antique store where he had found it, uncovering a series of tragic events that dated back to the early 20th century. The mirror had once belonged to a family that had met a horrifying fate. Every member had taken their own lives within the very room where the mirror now stood in our home. As we pieced together the story, it became clear that the mirror was more than just a decorative piece. It was a vessel for the lingering souls of the family, their unresolved anguish and despair trapped within its glass. The spirit of the youngest child, a boy named William, seemed to be the most active, his restless presence seeking acknowledgement and release from his eternal confinement. One particularly cold night, the situation escalated beyond anything we had previously experienced. The whispers turned into anguished cries, and the shadow in the mirror solidified into the unmistakable form of a young boy, his eyes filled with sorrow and desperation. "Help me," he pleaded, his voice echoing through the room like a mournful wind. Tears welled up in my eyes as I reached out to touch the mirror, hoping to offer some form of solace. My fingers made contact with the cool glass, and an electric shock coursed through my body, forcing me to pull back. The room plunged into darkness as the lights flickered and went out, leaving us in an abyss of night. Thomas fumbled for his phone, using its flashlight to illuminate the room once more. The mirror now showed the entire family, their faces contorted with pain and despair, their eyes hollow and lifeless. The atmosphere was thick with a palpable sense of loss, the air heavy with the weight of untold stories. "We need to help him," Thomas said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "We have to free his spirit." Determined to end the torment, we sought the help of a local spiritualist named Madame Lavinia, renowned for her ability to communicate with restless souls and break curses. She arrived at our home on Christmas Eve, her presence calm and reassuring amidst the chaos. After examining the mirror, Madame Lavinia nodded thoughtfully. "This mirror is indeed a portal for the spirits of the lost family. To free William and his family, we must perform a ritual of remembrance and release, honoring their memory and acknowledging their suffering." We followed her instructions meticulously, setting up a small altar in the living room with candles, fresh flowers, and photographs we had found of the family from the antique store's archives. As the ritual began, Madame Lavinia chanted softly, her voice weaving a protective barrier around us. "Spirits bound by sorrow, hear our plea. We honor your memory. We set you free. May peace find your hearts. May love guide your way. And may your souls find rest this Christmas day." As the chanting continued, the mirror began to glow with a soft, golden light. The shadows receded, and the images of the family became clearer, their expressions softening as if sensing the shift in energy. William stepped forward, his form more translucent yet peaceful. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice no longer filled with pain but with gratitude. "Now I can rest." With those final words, the mirror's glow intensified, enveloping the room in a warm, comforting light. The spirits of the family slowly faded, their presence dissolved by the ritual's power. The oppressive energy lifted, replaced by a serene calm that settled over our home. As the last flicker of light dimmed, Madame Lavinia smiled softly. "They are free now. May your home be filled with peace and joy." The following morning, we woke up to a quiet house, the events of the night before seemingly erased. The mirror stood innocently on the wall, its glass clear and untainted, reflecting the bright morning light. The haunting presence that had plagued our home was gone, replaced by the warmth and cheer of Christmas morning. In the days that followed, the mirror became a cherished family heirloom, a symbol of the power of love and remembrance. We made sure to honor the memory of William and his family every Christmas, lighting candles and sharing their story to ensure their spirits would never be forgotten. Years later, as I reflect on that Christmas, I realize how fragile our connection to the past can be and how the unresolved pain of those who have passed can linger in the most unexpected places. The experience taught me the importance of understanding and respecting the histories embedded in our possessions and the enduring power of compassion in overcoming darkness. Sometimes, when the winter winds howl and the snow begins to fall, I can almost hear the faint echoes of William's laughter, a haunting melody that speaks of hope and the eternal quest for peace. The spirit of that Christmas night lives on in my heart, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always a path to redemption and healing, because in the heart of winter, amidst the silent snow and the lingering shadows, the echoes of the past continue to resonate, forever entwined with the stories we cherish and the memories we hold dear. Story number 6. Whispers from the Past. Winter in Melbourne was a time of magic and melancholy. The city, adorned with festive lights and bustling with holiday cheer, seemed to pulse with life even as the nights grew longer and colder. My name is Liam Thompson, and what was supposed to be a joyous Christmas in 2003 turned into a nightmare that my family and I can never escape. It was the morning of December 24th, a day filled with anticipation and excitement. Our home, a cozy townhouse nestled in a quiet suburb, was alive with the scent of pine and cinnamon. The living room was a scene straight out of a holiday card. A towering Christmas tree decorated with ornaments collected over the years, stockings hung with care, and presents stacked neatly beneath the branches. My parents, Helen and Michael, were bustling around, finishing up last-minute preparations, while my younger sister, Emily, and I eagerly awaited the arrival of Santa Claus. As afternoon gave way to evening, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, transforming our backyard into a winter wonderland. We played outside, our laughter echoing through the crisp air, building snowmen and engaging in friendly snowball fights. It was a picture-perfect Christmas Eve, one that promised warmth and joy despite the chill. That night, as we gathered around the dinner table for our traditional Christmas meal, an unexpected knock echoed through the house. Curious, I glanced out the window to see who could be visiting us so late. There was no one in sight, no one walking up the driveway or approaching the front door. I shrugged it off, assuming it was a late-night delivery or perhaps a neighbor in need of assistance. After dinner, we retreated to the living room to open presents. The excitement was palpable as we unwrapped gifts, each one bringing smiles and expressions of gratitude. Among the presents, I found a neatly wrapped box addressed to me in elegant, unfamiliar handwriting. My heart skipped a beat. "Mom, Dad, I don't remember seeing this on the list," I said, holding up the gift. Helen and Michael exchanged puzzled glances before taking the box from my hands. "We didn't send you anything, Liam," Helen remarked, her brow furrowing in confusion. Michael examined the envelope. "There's no return address," he noted, carefully lifting the lid. Inside was an old, worn photograph of a family I didn't recognize and a small, ornate knife. The photograph was sepia-toned, showing a smiling family of 4 standing in front of a large, Victorian-style house. The knife was delicate, with intricate engravings along the handle, clearly a family heirloom of some sort. I stared at the photo, feeling a chill run down my spine. "I don't know who this family is," I admitted, the unease settling in my stomach. "Why would someone send us this?" Before anyone could respond, the room seemed to grow colder. The lights dimmed, and an oppressive silence filled the space. I shrugged off the discomfort, attributing it to overactive imagination or perhaps the chilly winter night. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That night, after tucking Emily into bed, couldn't sleep. The image of the unfamiliar family lingered in my mind, their smiles now seeming forced and hollow. I decided to place the photograph on my bedside table, hoping it would help me process the strange gift. As I lay down, the room plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the faint glow of the moon filtering through the curtains. At around 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by a soft, haunting melody. It was a lullaby, slow and distorted, emanating from the direction of my bedside table. My heart pounded as I sat up, scanning the room for the source of the sound. The photograph was still there, its eyes seemingly following my every move. The melody grew louder, more insistent, filling the room with an eerie presence. I reached out a trembling hand towards the photograph, but before I could touch it, the music abruptly stopped. The room was silent once more, but the feeling of being watched remained. I tried to rationalize what was happening. Perhaps the wind rattling the window or an old record player malfunctioning. But something about the whole situation felt too deliberate, too personal. The next morning, I shared the experience with my parents. Helen suggested that the music box inside the gift might have been broken or had some electrical fault causing the noise. Michael, ever the practical one, thought it best to dispose of the box and the photograph, hoping to put the strange events behind us. But before we could take any action, more unsettling occurrences began to plague our household. Objects started moving on their own, books sliding off shelves, chairs shifting position, and the small ornate knife from the gift box appearing in different places each morning. The atmosphere in our home grew increasingly tense, the festive spirit overshadowed by an undercurrent of fear and unease. Emily, sensing the growing tension, began to act out more. She would cry in the middle of the night, claiming she saw a family in her room, their eyes empty and their smiles twisted. She insisted that they were trying to communicate with her, that they needed our help. Her innocent pleas only deepened the mystery, leaving us more confused and terrified. Determined to uncover the truth, Michael and I decided to research the origins of the photograph and the ornate knife. Our investigation led us to old newspaper archives and historical records, piecing together a tragic story from decades past. The family in the photograph, John, Mary, their 2 children, and their daughter Sarah, had been a happy, close-knit family living in the Victorian house depicted in the photo. But one Christmas Eve in 1935, tragedy struck. A devastating house fire consumed their home, claiming the lives of every family member. The newspaper clippings detailed the horrifying event, describing how the family had perished in the flames, their possessions scattered and destroyed. But one item had survived: the ornate knife, left behind by the fire, and the photograph, which had been salvaged from the ashes. The mystery deepened as we discovered that the photograph and knife had been separated for decades, only to inexplicably find their way back to us in the form of that ominous Christmas gift. Realizing that the spirits of the lost family might be trying to communicate with us, we sought the help of a local medium, Mrs. Adelaide Gray. She was renowned for her ability to bridge the gap between the living and the dead, offering solace to those tormented by restless spirits. Mrs. Gray arrived at our home one chilly evening, her presence calm and reassuring. She examined the photograph and the knife with a practiced eye, her fingers tracing the delicate engravings on the handle. "These items are imbued with the sorrow and pain of a family lost too soon," she explained. "Their spirits are trapped, unable to move on from the tragedy that befell them." She conducted a séance, guiding us through a ritual to communicate with the spirits and offer them peace. As she chanted softly, the room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with anticipation. The atmosphere shifted, the oppressive energy lifting slightly as we reached out to the lost family. "John, Mary, Sarah," Mrs. Gray called out gently, her voice a soothing balm in the tense room. "We honor your memory and seek to understand your sorrow. Please, let us help you find peace." A heavy silence followed, broken only by the soft crackling of the candles. Then, a faint presence made itself known. The air grew colder still, and we felt the weight of unseen eyes upon us. The spirits began to materialize, their forms ethereal and shimmering, their eyes filled with sorrow and longing. "Help us," John's spirit whispered, his voice a haunting echo. "We cannot find peace." Understanding dawned on me. The spirits were trapped by their tragic end, their anguish keeping them bound to our world. The photograph and the knife were remnants of their lives, the key to their release. But how could we help them move on? Mrs. Gray explained that the spirits needed recognition and acknowledgement of their suffering. By honoring their memory and sharing their story, we could help alleviate the pain that kept them tethered to the mortal realm. We decided to create a memorial in their honor, a place where their story could be remembered and their spirits could find the peace they desperately sought. On Christmas Day, we gathered with friends and family to unveil a memorial in our backyard. We placed the photograph and the ornate knife on a stone pedestal, surrounded by candles and fresh flowers. As we lit the candles, we shared the tragic story of the Thompson family, ensuring that their memory would live on. As the last candle was lit, a gentle warmth filled the air, the oppressive cold lifting as if a heavy burden had been lifted from our home. The spirits of John, Mary, and Sarah appeared one final time, their expressions softening into ones of gratitude and peace. "Thank you," they whispered, their voices now filled with relief. "We can finally rest." With those final words, the spirits dissolved into the light, leaving behind a serene calm that enveloped our home. The music box ceased its haunting melody, and the shadows that had once haunted our nights were gone. The lingering fear that had gripped us was replaced by a sense of closure and hope. In the days that followed, our home felt lighter, the festive spirit restored without the undercurrent of fear. The mysterious gift box had been the catalyst for a journey that brought us closer as a family and taught us the importance of honoring and remembering those who have passed on. Years later, as I reflect on that Christmas, I realize how fragile our connection to the past can be, and how the unresolved pain of those who have departed can linger in the most unexpected places. The memory of that haunting season remains vivid, a testament to the thin veil between our world and the supernatural. The story of the lost Thompson family became a local legend, shared among neighbors and whispered in hushed tones during the holiday season. It served as a poignant reminder that behind every seemingly perfect facade lies a story of love, loss, and the unyielding quest for peace. Our experience also deepened my understanding of the spiritual world, revealing that the bonds we form and the memories we hold dear can transcend even death itself. The act of remembering and honoring the past was not just a gesture of respect but a powerful force capable of altering the very fabric of our existence. Sometimes, during the quieter moments of winter, I still feel a gentle breeze brush against my skin, and I hear the faint strains of a lullaby echoing through the halls of our home. It's a comforting reminder that the spirits of the Thompson family are at peace, their stories forever entwined with our own. Their presence, though no longer menacing, remains a subtle yet enduring part of our lives, a reminder of the importance of love, compassion, and the power of remembrance, because in the heart of winter, amidst the silent snow and the lingering shadows, the echoes of the past continue to resonate, forever a part of the stories we cherish and the memories we hold dear. Story number 7. The Snowman's Secret. Winter had settled its icy grip on Maine, transforming my small hometown into a postcard-perfect Christmas scene. It was the kind of place where the snow blanketed everything in pristine white. Icicles hung from rooftops like frozen chandeliers, and the air was thick with the scent of pine and chimney smoke. My name is Claire Morton, and in December of 2017, I received a Christmas gift that changed my life forever. It all started innocently enough. I had been wandering through a local antique shop, my favorite pastime during the holiday season. The shop was a treasure trove of forgotten memories, filled with dusty trinkets, tarnished jewelry, and relics from a bygone era. That day, something unusual caught my eye: a porcelain snowman, no more than a foot tall, standing proudly on a cluttered shelf. This craftsmanship was exquisite. The snowman wore a top hat and a red scarf, its black coal eyes gleaming with an eerie, lifelike quality. Its porcelain surface was smooth and unblemished, save for faint cracks that gave it an air of age and mystery. It wasn't expensive, and something about it called to me, a quiet insistence that I couldn't ignore. Without thinking too much about it, I bought the snowman and brought it home to my modest one-bedroom cottage on the outskirts of town. I placed it on the mantel above the fireplace, where it seemed to watch over the room with a silent, unblinking gaze. That night, as the wind howled outside and snow piled against the windows, I settled onto the couch with a mug of hot cocoa and a book. The snowman stood in the periphery of my vision, its presence oddly comforting in the dim light of the fire. But as the hours passed and the night grew quieter, a strange unease crept over me. It started with a faint tapping sound. At first, I thought it was the branches of the old oak tree outside brushing against the windowpane. But when I checked, the tree was perfectly still in the frozen air. The tapping continued, irregular and insistent, as though someone or something was knocking from within the walls. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was just the house settling in the cold. But then came the footsteps, soft and deliberate. They echoed from the hall, growing louder as they approached the living room. My heart pounded as I clutched the edge of the couch, straining to hear over the crackle of the fire. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. There was no answer. I rose cautiously, gripping the fireplace poker for protection. The footsteps stopped abruptly, leaving an oppressive silence in their wake. I searched the house, every shadow and corner, but found nothing out of place. Finally, I convinced myself it was my imagination and returned to the living room, only to freeze in my tracks. The snowman had moved. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. His head, which had been tilted slightly to the right, now faced straight ahead. The coal eyes seemed to glint with something darker, more menacing. In the flickering firelight, a chill ran down my spine, and I laughed nervously to myself. "You're losing it, Claire," I muttered, adjusting the snowman back to its original position. But as I turned to leave, I felt it, a cold, heavy presence in the room, pressing against my senses like a suffocating weight. That was the first night. Over the next few days, the strange occurrences escalated. The tapping grew louder, sometimes pounding against the walls and windows with enough force to shake the frames. Objects in my home began to move on their own, books falling off shelves, the kitchen faucet turning on by itself. And once, the snowman itself was found lying on its side, several feet from the mantel where I had left it. I started sleeping with the lights on. Though sleep was elusive, the air in the house felt charged, as though some unseen force was watching, waiting. I couldn't escape the snowman's gaze, its coal-black eyes seeming to follow me wherever I went. Desperate for answers, I turned to the antique shop where I'd bought it. The shopkeeper, a frail elderly woman with sharp eyes, seemed reluctant to speak when I described the snowman. She finally admitted that it had been part of a collection purchased from an estate sale. "Whose estate?" I pressed. The woman hesitated before whispering. "Elias Grayson. He was a toy maker and a killer." My blood ran cold as she recounted the story. Elias Grayson had been a reclusive artisan who lived in a remote cabin just outside of town. His toys were works of art, but they came with a dark legacy. During the winter of 1954, Grayson had gone mad, murdering 6 children and encasing parts of their remains in his creations. The snowman, she said, had been one of his final works before he vanished without a trace. I left the shop in a daze, clutching the snowman tightly in my arms. The thought of discarding it crossed my mind, but something about it felt wrong. It was as though the snowman wouldn't let me go, his presence clinging to me like a shadow. That night, I was awoken by a blood-curdling scream. It echoed through the house, shaking the very walls. I bolted upright, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The scream wasn't human, it was something guttural, primal, filled with rage and despair. And then I saw it. The snowman was no longer on the mantel. It stood at the foot of my bed, its coal-black eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Its porcelain surface was cracked and discolored, oozing a dark, viscous fluid that reeked of decay. Its once innocent grin had twisted into a grotesque sneer. "Why are you here?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. The snowman tilted its head, as though considering my question, and then, in a voice that was both childlike and ancient, it rasped, "To remember." The lights flickered, and the room was plunged into darkness. When they came back on, the snowman was gone, but the tapping, the footsteps, and the oppressive presence remained, growing stronger with each passing night. Unable to bear it any longer, I sought the help of a paranormal investigator named Marcus Gray. He was a grizzled man with a reputation for solving cases that others deemed unsolvable. When he entered my home, he immediately sensed the dark energy emanating from the snowman. "This isn't just a haunted object," he said grimly. It's a beacon, a tether for something far worse. He explained that the snowman was a vessel, a repository for the anguish and torment of Grayson's victims. Their souls were trapped, unable to move on, bound to the twisted creation of their murderer. To free them, we would need to perform a cleansing ritual that would sever the connection and release their spirits. The ritual was conducted in the dead of night, the snowstorm outside raging with unrelenting fury. Marcus drew a circle of salt around the snowman, chanting incantations that filled the air with an almost tangible light. The snowman writhed within the circle, its porcelain surface cracking and shattering as dark shadows poured out, wailing and shrieking. As the final words of the ritual were spoken, the snowman exploded into a cloud of dust, the shadows dissolving into the light. The oppressive energy lifted, leaving the house bathed in an eerie calm. For the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. The snowman was gone, but its memory lingers, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide behind even the most innocent of facades. I never found out who sent it to me or why, but I learned to respect the power of the unknown, because sometimes the past refuses to stay buried, and the shadows we think we've escaped have a way of finding us again.